In this video, we're taking a deep dive into espresso portafilters. That's this thing here. It has a head and a handle, and at Decent, we let you make your own portafilter with whatever handle and head you want. There are three kinds of heads. There are bottomless heads like this. There are spouted ones for splitting an espresso into two parts. And there are tea portafilters, which, you guessed it, are for making tea. You may notice there's some Teflon tape on the end of that. That's to keep the portafilter handle from untightening as you use it. And the nice thing is that that holds it in place and it doesn't unscrew once it's there. This is a fairly standard size portafilter handle. It's a whole hand kind of thing. If you have a small hand, you might want to get this small one that we make. We also use it for the Decent espresso machine. We put the big handle here and the small one here. So we tend to call that a group head handle, but it works equally well for making a portafilter. That's what a small handle looks like on a portafilter. It's better for small hands, or you just want to differentiate your portafilters, or you just like the way it looks. And you can see it also fits in your hand just fine. Here we have four kinds of materials for handles. We have a natural wood, a painted black wood, a olive wood handle, which is made from reclaimed olive trees from Italy at the end of their life. When they're uprooted, they get repurposed. And the colors on that and the patterns are very eccentric. It really depends on the decades of age and how it's grown and twisted. And then finally, we have our resin handles. The main reason to choose one or another is first aesthetics. You might like the way the natural or the olive look, or even the resin. However, wood is going to be less long lasting than resin. If you bang it against something that's sharp, you are going to get a little notch there. If you get the black one, you will get the paint off. So generally, if you want a wood handle and you want to be long lived, I recommend you don't get a painted one. You get a natural one so that any little knocks on it are not that visible. You also cannot soak wood in water. Now, it's not something you would normally do, but one nice thing about these resin ones is you can literally put them in the dishwasher and they're just fine with that. At this point, we have so many different options of portafilter heads and handles that we decided to just make a web page and let you make your own so you can mix and match however you want. If you buy this small handle, we call the group head handle, we put a small black washer on it, which you can remove if you're not putting this handle on a Decent espresso machine. If you are leaving it on a Decent espresso machine, you can see here, this is where the handle goes. And there's a washer inside here to give a nice space between the group head cover and the wood handle itself.
I'm going to show you how to wrap the Teflon tape or plumbing tape around the M10 nut, and you should generally buy a plumbing tape that is at least the width of the actual thread itself. And because Teflon tape is naturally elastic, what you'll find as soon as you start to wrap it is that it will naturally start to stick to the thread of the actual screw itself. With around 8 inches, which is around the width of an A4 piece of paper, you will find that you will get enough Teflon tape on there to secure the handle straight onto there without any wiggle. So I've roughly done that about now, and then towards the end you just want to keep going around the top and essentially make a little wrapping cone, and as you're finished at the top, the tension of what you're wrapping should just finish off there, and you pull it off and then you wrap it round, and then you will have a lovely little Teflon wrap thread.
So Paul's done a much more gorgeous job than I do. I just go wrap, wrap, yank,
okay.
and it works just fine. Try to follow what Paul's done, but if you don't, it'll still work just fine. So you want to thread that on there now?
Yeah, gently ease it in first because we want to make sure that it's not snagging in the thread. And then once you feel it biting in, then you can increase your speed. If you do see it snag towards the end, you may have put too much around, and I would stop at that point and just take it out and re-wrap it. It's quite cheap stuff, so don't feel about you just going to waste it.
What I like now is it's tight in there, and you can see I'm moving back and forth. It's not coming off. With just a little bit of force, I can take it off. That's so you can replace this handle if you want to, and nonetheless, tighten it in place, and now it's good to go again.
I would just like to add one more thing onto that. You can reuse the same thread, like maybe once or twice, but upon the third one, just be mindful that you are wearing away the Teflon tape that you put around there. You might need to just add another fresh layer.
I'll also mention that our portafilter heads do work with other machines. The double-spouted one and the T portafilter tends to work with any machine that is the E61 standard. The first thing you're looking for is for these parts here on the right and left. They're called wings. You want them at 90 degrees from the handle, like so. If they are offset here, then you'll probably have Nueva Seleni portafilter heads, and you can't get them from us, you'll have to buy them from someone else. The T portafilter also works with other machines, pretty much every machine that follows the E61 standard. Our bottomless, though, are a bit more finicky. We find they work with E61 machines, but not all of them on the planet. It seems that the wing fit is not perfect, so possibly not the best. What I recommend you do is, if you already have a portafilter you like, but you like our handle, just buy the handle and just swap that out, and that's the safest thing to keep in mind. On our spouted portafilter, you might notice that these spouts are offset, and there's a washer in here making that happen. The reason for that is that if I come here and I lock it into the machine, then it locks here and the spout is level. And the reason that it's offset is because the portafilter doesn't lock at 90 degrees, it locks in here. And that way we can put two cups here. If we didn't do that, the two cups would have to be like that, which would be annoying. If you need your spouts to be aligned in a different way, you'll need to get yourself a wrench, and you can just take this off and put a different washer or no washer in order to lock at a different position. One thing to bear in mind if you get a spouted portafilter is you should take the basket out once in a while and clean the mud that accumulates inside here, because that is kind of a trap for old coffee, and it doesn't taste good when your fresh coffee pours and mixes with your old stuff. There is a spring right here which holds a basket. When you put a basket in, this spring retains it. And sometimes what can happen is, if your basket is jammed in and you haven't got it straight, is you can bang the spring out. Now, you can see here that there's a slot that the spring is fitting in. It's possible to make the spring pop out if you jam a basket in and it's not really going in straight, and that spring can pop out. It'll pop out and you'll have trouble finding it. So sometimes it's nice to have extra springs around, or just pay attention to where the spring lands and then put it back in there. When you want to put a basket into a portafilter, you put it in like so, and then give it a nice click. To take a basket out, there's a couple different ways. So one way is to just push on the back like this, and it comes out. However, if your spring is quite new, you might have trouble. The secret technique is to use another basket, namely use the ledge right here. And you put it in here and you twist, and that makes it pop up. And you can do that to both sides, and then the basket can be just pulled right out. If you've got a nut box and you need to knock the puck out, you always want to make sure that you don't bang on the handle, but you either bang it on the basket or this metal part here. So let me demonstrate. One way is like this. Okay, another way is like this. You don't want to do that, because that's going to damage your handle. You might also notice that our knockbox here has got a lower front, and that's specifically so that if you're doing this, you don't jam your hand right into the bottom of the knockbox. So if you do have a knockbox that's flat, make sure that you lift your hand and you go in like that, because wrapping your knuckles into the side of a knockbox is not so fun. These portafilter heads are solid stainless steel, and then they're polished to be shiny. You will find other ones that can be made out of brass or other kinds of metals. Generally, the ones that are of brass then get chromed, and they will scratch and look ugly pretty quickly, but they still function quite well. There are other ones made out of unknown metal materials, and I wouldn't recommend those, as they can degrade and they tend to scratch up and look ugly pretty fast. It's also nice to have a heavy stainless steel head, just feels good in the hand. We do make some handles that we think are kind of nice looking. There are artisan woodmakers out there that do amazing work with handles, and we are specifically following this M10 standard. So you can buy our heads and you can use other people's wood handles. And part of the Decent Espresso community website on Diaspora has links to a number of other artisan woodmakers that make just gorgeous stuff. And if that's your thing, splash the cash and get something amazing. Should you leave the portafilter in the group head? I think Paul and I have just slightly different feelings about this. Paul prefers to leave the portafilter off, like so. My own preference is to have it in, but just biting the rubber and no more. Now, the reason I do that is so that when the machine heats up in the morning, the portafilter heats up. Otherwise, I end up showing up at 8 in the morning, desperate in need of coffee with a cold portafilter. But I think it's sort of standard cafe etiquette to clean everything and leave it out, showing that it's clean. Maybe because it's like evidence that there's no puck in here, right? Because if you lock it in here, who knows, maybe you've got yesterday's stale coffee puck sitting there.
So it's different with everyone. Some people believe that they even want a puck in there to retain more heat. So it does.
God.
Yeah. So it really depends
Don't
on
do
who
that.
you speak to.
You don't want stale coffee sitting in these holes that you then have to, because then you have to wash it right before you make your coffee. So I wouldn't leave a coffee puck. Portafilters can have a lot of mass, and one of the advantages of the bottomless portafilter is that it's smaller, and so it does heat up a lot faster. Now, for a machine like the Decent that is temperature accurate, a lighter portafilter makes more sense because you don't need to waste energy heating up all this stainless steel. If you have an older machine that is not as temperature accurate, that uses large amounts of metal to get its temperature accuracy, then often getting a heavier portafilter makes more sense, and letting it heat for an hour, it makes a lot of sense. On our double spouted portafilter, you can see that this is not that tall, and what that means is that you can put up to a 20-gram basket in here. If you try and do a 22 or 24, it will poke out from the top. La Marzocco makes a very tall portafilter head. It's about yay big, it's massive, and you can put 24-gram baskets in it. But I would say doses over 20 gram are not that common, especially with split shots these days. Generally, the people who do large doses are doing light roast. If they're doing light roast, they're not using a double spout. So this kind of size, you can do any basket up to 20 grams and it'll fit just fine. If you need to do a 24-gram basket, you'll need to switch to a bottomless that can take any size basket you throw at it. Can I compensate having a cold portafilter and make the temperature of the shot hotter? So first thing I would say is, do you have a Decent or not? If you have a Decent espresso machine, the compensation happens automatically. The temperature of the water on a Decent machine is measured just above here. It's just 2 millimeters above the coffee puck, and the hot water is automatically hotter than your goal. So if you ask for, say, a 92 centigrade puck, the machine is going to deliver 94, 95 centigrade. And if your portafilter is cold, the machine is going to continue putting hotter water in order to drag it up. If your portafilter is already hot, the machine is automatically going to put water that's closer to your goal. You don't have to do anything. So that's what I would say about a Decent. If you, however, have a E61, say, or any traditional boiler machine that can't do variable temperature, just avoid this whole thing. Do a flush. Just preheat your portafilter because you can't quickly change the boiler temperature. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. Just rely on your hot water, give it a good few seconds underneath the flush. Pooling it is also very helpful as well inside the portafilter. So when I used to use doubles, I used to pool some flushed water in there and let it dribble out slowly while you're preparing. And then you can give it a quick dry and rest assured it's pretty hot.
Okay. As far as knocking the puck out and cleaning the basket, you've noticed that we use our pitcher rinser a lot. And what we do is we knock the puck out, go here, and then rinse. We now have some water here. You saw me do a little motion like that. I then take a towel, dry it out, and do that. Now that is cold water. as cold as it gets here, which is about 30 centigrade right now. So it's not exactly freezing cold. If you're hyper concerned about the temperature of your basket, you can plug your pitcher rinser into hot water. And I've seen people do that at a trade show. I used a sous vide machine to preheat my water to about 50 Celsius. And that is not a bad thing to do at all. However, you saw I was maybe not even 1 second of water there and then coming it out. The mass around the portafilter is still really hot. I don't really feel that that quick rinse cools off any of this in any way that matters. You can double check that if you have a decent, because it shows you the puck temperature, and you can try a hot water rinse, a cold water rinse, whatever you like. And you can then look at the tablet to see, was your puck temperature affected by what you just did? Is there a recommended amount of headspace above the puck? Now, it really depends on what kind of coffee you're trying to do. Now, headspace is when you have the coffee in here, how much space, how much airspace there is before the espresso shower screen pushes down on it. Now, you can tell, there's a simple test to see if your shower screen is pushing down. After you put your coffee grinds in, tamp it super lightly and then put a coin in and then lock it in. Take it out and you will see whether your coin was pressed in further or not. And you get an idea of how far the machine is pushing into the puck that way. Headspace is a complicated question, but briefly, when you have more headspace, you let the coffee bloom. And generally, more headspace is beneficial to lighter roasts. You get another percentage extraction. However, it does mean that the puck has not been squeezed as tightly and it's more likely to channel. So less headspace means that when that puck blooms, the shower screen pushes against it and all the air pockets inside kind of even out and the puck is prevented from expanding fully. When water then comes through that, it tends to be less likely to channel and also likely to give you more body. I think that's what you found as well.
That's very true, yeah.
Yeah. And there are people in the Decent community who sell a modification kit. And over the 7 years we've been making this machine, we've been lowering the headspace. We started with a very ample amount because we were aiming for clarity. And then as we've moved through the years, we've ended up with the same amount of headspace as E61 machines. And the reason is it's much easier to add headspace than remove it. If you don't have enough headspace with, say, a 15-gram basket, use the same coffee dose and move to an 18-gram basket. Bingo, now you've got more headspace. But having less headspace means putting more and more coffee into your basket, and then it goes to the edge, and it becomes a bit fussy to work with.
You can play around with your dose a little bit more, but the coin trick is very, very useful. And as soon as you finish the puck, you can see if there's an indentation or not. You can try and play around with dose a little bit with that same basket, but you're really playing around with 0.3 up and down. So you may as well switch to a bigger basket at that point if you're finding that. Generally,
with lighter roasts, as you decrease the headspace beyond a certain point, you're going to start getting a muddier, less clear flavor. And I know with your experiments, we're going to do a video about this with many different baskets.
Yeah.
There was this critical point where you made the shot easier to pull, less channeling, and then it started to get muddy.
Yeah, it was quite a significant change. It was almost like going off a cliff. You immediately notice it, and then the extractions weren't as nice. And it was to put it down simply, it was just correlation between puck depth, your headspace, and how much opportunity there was to channel due to those two variables. So we'll explain more later in the video, but it definitely led to higher TDSs in the ones with less headspace as compared to the ones with less headspace. Yeah.
Thank you for watching this deep dive into espresso portafilters. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, John.
See you next time.